Call to order the Finance Committee meeting for January 30. On the mic, so let me turn the mic on. Call to order the Finance Committee meeting for Thursday, January 30, 2020. A roll call, please.
Mr. Lear?
Present.
Mr. Washington?
Present.
Mr. Hess?
Present.
Mr. Byrne? Ms. Weber?
Present.
Mr. Payton?
Present.
Ms. Parker?
Present.
Mr. Kinzinger?
Present.
Mr. Zenz? Ms. Haas?
Present.
Mr. Swanson?
Present.
Ms. Zucolo?
Present.
Mr. Dennell?
Present.
Mr. Miller?
Present.
Mr. Wheeler? Mr. Seroy?
Present.
We have a quorum.
I have no request for public comment. Are there any requests for public comment? Seeing none, we have no presentations. We'll move to the minutes for the December 19, 2019 meeting. Is there a motion to approve? Mr. Washington, Mr. Hess. Any discussion on the minutes? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. We move to the Finance Department. Mr. McCarty, you have the financial reports and discussion. Financial reports in your packet. So you can examine those as he's coming up. Good morning. Good morning. Looks like once again, largely good news.
Yep. Good morning. Yeah, the first group that we have today, just update income tax, sales tax, use tax, those types of things. Yeah, continued strong trends with income tax and use tax. Unfortunately, the sales tax is kind of a scratch your head one here, watching the trend of this. So we'll continue to watch that. Sheriff will keep us updated, I'm sure, as far as the bed rental, and then replacement tax is also coming in strong, continues to be strong. So yeah, for the most part, good news, and we'll continue to watch sales tax. You know, more than likely it's the struggle between online and brick and mortar, but we'll continue to watch the trend. You know, if you look at the history of the sales tax, it's kind of it's been going up and down here the last few years, so it's kind of confusing why that's going on. So I don't know if there's any specific questions or not.
I see no questions on revenue streams. If there are no questions, we'll move on to cash flow. Mr. Hess.
I'll make a motion, we combine and approve these before we get into discussion on any of them, the reports.
I don't recall we need to approve these reports.
Yeah, they're just for information.
These are informational reports. There's
Okay.
no need to have it.
With the property tax abatement?
Oh, that's a separate issue we'll get to in a minute.
Yeah,
All right, thank you.
We want to discuss cash flow update first, and then we'll get to that one. That will require a motion. You are correct. So there are no questions on revenue streams, cash flow analysis.
Yeah, you should have fiscal year 19 and 20.
Yeah, we do.
They're on back-to-back pages for you guys. Really, just an update. We're watching May of 20. Very close. I had a short conversation with Nick Africano the other day, and he graciously offered to help if we need it. So appreciate that. He probably thought whenever I stop in his office that I'm coming to look for deposits of any sort, and he's always willing to help, but this time I just stopped to say hi. But this is our 3 payroll month during our toughest cash flow time, and I don't believe I'm sweating right now, so it's all good news. So we're and you know, we're doing it without any additional help, which is you know, a positive. But if you look at our main inflows of cash, during the next 4 or 5 months here. It's the inmate bed rental and the miscellaneous receipts, and those are primarily made up of the federal and state transactions that they send to us. So it's a bit out of our control. So, we have some contingency plans just in case, there's a hiccup. I don't know of any at this point, but, that's why we watch it really close. The good news, if you look at the estimated end of November of 20 and the bottom line there of $10.4 million of cash, and then compare it to 2019 where we ended in November of 19 at 7.1, it'll be continued growth. So as this will flow into 21, this discussion will get easier and easier as we progress. So it's still good news. It's still positive. This time without property tax, these months, and after the 3 payroll month is historically always been, our tightest time of watching. So, we're watching it close, but right now I don't have any worries about that. We'll get through it. We are close enough that we have to make sure we have, to pay attention to the contingencies. So, so it's all good news. We're not spending, at this point, any plans to spend taxpayer money on interest for the TAWs. But that's a contingency as well as, micromanaging our accounts payable if we have to, as another contingency in Nick's offer as well. So there's ways to manage, depending on if there was a fluctuation or not. So that's just a brief update for everybody. I don't know if there's any questions.
Mr. Sierra.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Steve, that's the greatest news we've heard on this committee for a long time, that we haven't had to borrow from ourselves to pay ourselves. So kudos to you and your department for staying ahead of this, and this board for maintaining the hard line on spending and cuts, and working with our labor unions to make sure that this thing, and also the sheriff's office for keeping up their end of the bargain. So kudos to everybody for working on this.
Any other question or comments? If not, we'll move to property tax abatement. Mr. Hess, did you have a motion?
I'll make the motion, yes.
A motion to approve the abatement. Is there a second? Mr. Swanson? You want to explain this a little? There's not much
It's
to
something
say.
we have to do every year. I believe the statement, I hope it's self-explanatory. It basically takes it off the tax levy because of, the annual payment. It's something we have to do every year. So if there's any questions or not.
This is a roll call vote, so if there is any discussion, we'll do that first. If not, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Lear,
Aye.
Mr. Washington, Mr. Hess,
Aye.
Ms. Weber, Mr. Payton, Ms. Parker, Mr. Kinzinger, Ms. Haas, Mr. Swanson, Ms. DeColo, Mr. Dennell, Mr. Miller, Mr. Searoy.
Aye.
Motion carries.
You have in your packet 2 claims not recommended from approval from the auditor. One of them because the employee drove an extra 2 to 4 miles by taking a different exit, and one because there was a charge in terms of international phone fees that the chairman needed when he was communicating with members of the board and traveling internationally. Is there a motion to approve these? Mr. Dunn, Mr. Washington seconds. Is there any question on the motion? Motions
I
to
just got
approve.
a comment.
Mr. Searoy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Lear, 2 to 4 miles when you're driving a far distance. I'm in transportation, and sometimes there's a semi stuck on the exit or a school bus on the side of the road, so it always ain't the safest way to go, but I guess if that's all they can find, that's a good find, is all I'm saying. But things happen on the road that you always can't predict or can't get to point A to point B. I don't know what happened with the 2 to 4 miles, but sometimes you just miss your exit too. If a semi's got you boxed in, I think this is ridiculous, but that's my comment.
I'd clarify one thing that shared. If I would just clarify something, as it came for us and talking with Anita about this, the comment was that we're supposed to use the shortest distance. The comments on the front of the claim for the Michael Mergenthaler was from the auditor's office. I downloaded what's on our county website that our employees would go and find our policy and our the expense reimbursement policy, as well as the form, and neither one say that you're supposed to use the shortest distance. There's no indication of that anywhere on there for an employee to know that, as far as what the question was in the recalculation. So, and this is also from the sequence going for grant activity, and we also downloaded and gave you a copy of the federal grant regulation on that, and it talks about that it refers to the local non-federal entities document policy and procedures. So they don't, the feds don't specifically say that either. So it's before you to, as far as do we pay the 9431 or the 8874 as recommended by the auditor.
All right. So are we clear on the motion? All right. We'll need a roll call vote, please.
Mr. Lear,
Aye.
Mr. Washington,
Aye.
Mr. Hess,
Aye.
Ms. Weber,
Aye.
Mr. Payton,
Aye.
Ms. Parker,
Aye.
Mr. Kinzinger,
Aye.
Ms. Haas,
Aye.
Mr. Swanson,
Aye.
Ms. Zucolo,
Aye.
Mr. Dunnell,
Aye.
Mr. Miller,
Aye.
Mr. Seroy,
Aye.
motion carries.
Was that both of them? Yeah. That was both. Okay.
All right. Are there any other things for the finance department? Seeing none, we'll move on to treasurer's office.
Real quick, we
okay.
are in the process of closing out fiscal year 19, so we'll have draft numbers for general fund, tort, and pension, and be able to discuss where the actuals came in for those for next month. So we're in the process of doing that right now. So
Excellent. Mr. Africano, you have in your packet the treasurer's report, the county collector's report, and the monthly, well, actually, you received those. I'm sorry, you received those. A motion to combine and approve the reports would be in order. Ms. Parker? Is there a second? Ms. Haas? This is receiving a report, so voicemail. Voicemail is good enough, yeah. All in favor? Well, first, is there any discussion on them? If there's no discussion, all in favor of receiving the reports, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. What do you have for us?
Good morning. The sheriff asked me to keep this brief, so. What I have, we are collecting taxes, as you know. We're allowing people since like December 1 to pay early, and surprisingly, a fair amount of people are paying early. So, and we're seeing small payments, $25, $35, $50, which is exactly what the plan was meant to do, right? Let people divide up their taxes. So pretty happy about that. Number two, met with the state treasurer's office yesterday, and they've graciously agreed to come in during tax time. We don't know if it'll be one day or a few days. They will set up a table in the lobby with their iCash program, which is their unclaimed assets program. And so if you come in to pay your taxes, or if you're just here, you'll be able to stop by their table and they'll do the research right there for you and tell you if you have any money owed or owed back to you, and give you the claim forms and help you fill them out. So it's a nice service they provide, and if we can provide it to our people, better yet. And then the last thing I have was really a great thing that came down the pike this week. I met with Midland, and I assume most people in here know what Illinois Funds is. Illinois Funds is run by the Treasurer's Office. It's an aggregation of savings, essentially. They came up with the idea that if we aggregate savings across the state from all the public entities and we could put it in one bank, we'd get better rates. And so the downside to it is it's a little bit cumbersome, the process. Some of the fees are a little problematic. They do e-pay as well. But the money leaves the state and goes to, I think, U.S. Bank Corp in Milwaukee is where we send it. Bradley Bourbonnais High School is one of my big taxing districts that uses it, but lots of districts use it. But in any case, Midland has decided that they've created I don't know if they're calling it a fund or a product, which will mirror Illinois Funds. So they will track Illinois Funds rate. Illinois Funds changes daily, but Midland will start at the beginning of the month with the rate. So if the rate's falling, you're going to be locked into a rate for 30 days. Then the rate will check back to Illinois Funds 30 days later, and that'll be the posted rate for the next 30 days. So it's an incredible deal for them to do this and being an Illinois bank, and really they've really tried to establish a local relationship with us. So we're really happy about that, because I think we'll be able to have some of our taxing bodies have their money. And then you're not calling an international bank, right? That, you have a phone tree that's 10 deep. You'll be able to call a banker here in town. So that was good news. Now, if it goes the opposite way and the interest goes up, again, that doesn't really work in your favor, because you're locked in at the lower rate if it's moving. But we'll address that when, rates are headed in that direction. Right now, they're headed down, and I think they're around 1.65 or something with Illinois Funds. So that was I thought it was innovative on Midland's part, and we're really excited. So they were here to talk about it, and I'd entertain any questions.
Mr. Kinzinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I assume we're talking about millions of dollars in deposits, and I want to know how that money would be assured to the county, and what kind of protections is Midland offering for that money?
It absolutely, that's a good question. It's $1 million plus, and the way that the money is insured, because it's $250,000 limit. And I'm going to draw a blank on the word. The money is spread across many banks across the U.S. in $250,000 intervals, so that it's that there's collateral. I'm sorry, that's the word I was looking for. It's collateralized across, how many ever banks. If it takes 100 banks to collateralize it, and it's all clearly listed out. Yeah, part of my statutory obligations are that the money has to be properly collateralized. So,
Any other questions? Anything more?
I think the sheriff's next.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. While the sheriff is coming up, I'd like to compliment Mr. Africano for this, first of all, with the Illinois State thing, and also with this idea of using a local bank to keep our money within the Illinois state, state borders. So I appreciate it. Thank you for your work.
Well, thank you, Mr. Kinzinger. And I just wanted to say, I don't know who was here when we were talking about healthcare, and Anita, I think, asked me, they said that they were going to charge X dollars a month for HSAs. And I think the beauty of having local banks is when you call your banker and you say, look, there's $5 million in your bank of the county's money. Don't charge our employees $2 a month, right? That's unacceptable to us. And they were like, oh yeah, exactly. No, we won't. So that's I think that's the positive as well. So thank you.
Sheriff? Yeah. The monthly update is in your packet. So you can examine that as the sheriff's coming up. And it looks like he's got another handout for us. Thank you.
So there's only 15 copies of this, because I looked and there was 13 numbers on the bottom of the agenda. So there's only 15 copies, so if the members of the committee could get one first, that would be great.
Good morning.
Before we get to the handout, the order would be the monthly update first.
Yes, correct. I just want them to have it so they can. So, monthly update. Couple things, and you probably noticed from Steve's report, in December of 2019, we actually brought in 7,000, I think he's got $7,800 less in 2019 than we did in 2018. That was the first time that's happened probably in 2.5 years that we brought in actually less money than the year before. However, having said that, we also know that there are only so many beds that we have, and we can't, that number will not continue to increase. And I think I told this committee before that all that can happen now is that we maintain where we were at in 2019. So obviously that's our goal. Whether that'll happen or not remains to be seen. There are a lot of factors that are weighing into that between the marshals and ICE. And so, time will tell, but we obviously are making some adjustments from a staffing standpoint when these numbers drop a little bit. So we will continue to do that. And just as a sidelight, I can tell you that for 4 days in January so far, we have had more local inmates than we have out-of-county inmates. So our local number has increased significantly, which it has continued to increase, and that obviously affects not only the revenue, but the expense. So I told the Finance Committee that our 2019 annual report will be available in February. We'll make it available to them, and we'll make it available to all the county board members when that is completed. So just an FYI. Questions on the update from the report?
Seeing none, go
Okay.
ahead.
Yeah, so I would rather pull back the request for animal control at this point and bring that actually through the Community Services Committee, just because that's who probably needs to hear this first, and then come back to the Finance Committee next month with requests. I can tell you, just to give you a heads up of where we're going with this, most of you know that the minimum wage on January 1st went up to $9.25 from $8.25. And on July 1st of 2020, it will go up to $10 an hour. And right now we have 4 people that are employed by animal control who are not making $10 an hour. So we want to stay ahead of that. But just to give you a heads up, but I think as a courtesy to the Community Services Committee, I think we should take this back through Community Services and go from there. And if the Community Service recommends what we're talking about to the Finance Committee, then we can obviously do something with it then.
That's good. Let's go ahead.
All right.
Yeah. The next item.
Next item. Oop.
Oh, Mr. Seawright.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. While we're talking about animal control, the treasurer, Mr. Africano, has a comment that he'd like to.
You want a dog?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I was being rushed, I thought, by the sheriff. And actually, what I forgot to say, and I think it's important to hear this board to hear, is since I've been here in 2016, Animal Control's books have never been better. They're incredible. So we're totally caught up. Everything's on time, and thank you.
Just for the record, that is Carrie Laird's issue, not mine. I can't take credit for it. So Carrie's doing a great job over there, so. Okay, lastly, the approval for the phone system. We brought that to this committee last meeting with a quote, and it was requested to get additional quotes, which we have. The quotes speak for themselves as far as the amounts. Those amounts are for the same work, probably different companies of phones, I'm guessing. Couple things, we do know that this price was talked about, the initial price was talked about first. The low bid, or the low quote, which is $1,176 less, was received after that number was out. So I'll leave it to the board's pleasure as to what they wish to do. I can tell you that our phone system right now is all handled by one company, countywide. However, when we got our system back in 2005, the county upgraded their system in, I don't know, help me out, 2015 maybe. And so they do not talk to each other right now. Not that that's a huge issue, but so.
Mr. Hess?
Thank you, Chairman. Sheriff, these are quotes. They weren't put out for bid, correct?
They were not, they were
So we
quotes.
do not have to accept the lowest bid, or the lowest quote.
You got an assistant state's attorney sitting right behind you.
Well, what I'm thinking is what you just mentioned, I don't think the lowest one will mirror with our system, will it? And Kevin's not here, but
Yeah, I mean, you can integrate, different companies integrate stuff all the time. How good that integration is, I have no idea.
Mr. Kissinger?
I was probably one of those that asked for bids, which I'm always, competition's a good thing. Was the second bidder notified that other bidders were going to be looking at this so that they had an opportunity to adjust their bid?
They were not.
So they didn't know that we put two other people being talked about?
Unless they watched the meeting.
Mr.
They're quotes. Yeah, they're quotes. They're not bids. Yeah.
What's the pleasure of the committee? Mr. Kissinger?
I move we accept the lowest bid. Our lowest quote.
Is there a second? I see no second, so that motion would die. Mr. Hess?
I asked Nancy if we had to
Oh,
Even when you bid, there's a caveat that says you don't necessarily have to take the lowest bid. You have to evaluate each bid. You have to evaluate the qualifications of the submitter. You have to evaluate what their job, like you wouldn't, just because somebody is the lowest bid doesn't mean they're most qualified to handle it. So you do have the duty to make sure that the person you award the bid to would be the most qualified. In this situation, I believe, if I remember conversations, that the sheriff and then the board, like we've had, the issue became, the reason why there were quotes requested was the phone lines kept going down at the sheriff's department, including corrections. So it was kind of an emergency situation to get that fixed, because you don't want the phone lines to go down, you don't want their means of communication to go down, and it kind of became more of a safety issue that was happening. So that's why I believe quotes were just obtained so that there could be moved a little faster. So that's my understanding of what's going on and why there's quotes. And you have responsibility to accept the lowest qualified quote or bidder.
And I would just add, first of all, I would say that these 3 companies, which are all located in the county, are all qualified, at least from the standpoint of being able to provide the service. The issue becomes, and Kevin is here, thank God, can talk technology. Yeah. So, you know, whether we as a county want to stay with the same vendor for all of our services countywide, that is up to this committee. Kevin can probably speak to the ability of what the phone system is capable of, more so than me, I know that.
Mr. Duval?
I heard board member Hess say my name, so I came up for that. I can't speak to the quotes because that's not the part I do. That's my responsibility but over the years, the sheriff talked about when we've updated our systems over here. To be clear, we've done them in different periods, and all of the departments here paid, for the most part, paid for their various systems. So there isn't one, there's multiple ones. But I can tell you from dealing with Trent on a monthly, weekly basis, theirs is the oldest, and they have nothing of problems. It's been great that they've been able to stretch it this long, but I can only speak to the point they absolutely need something bad will happen, and they really can't afford that to happen. But I was more speaking to the fact we have multiple systems. The ones that we're all on are basically the same system over here. I believe they may be trying to go to something that's a step above us.
To us?
Yeah, I believe,
Well, I don't
which
think
is
so.
what they should do, because ours are newer than theirs by quite a bit, but
Right.
they're still not new. I
Right.
think they're trying to get to that point where everybody needs to be, where it's, all right, we're not just barely creeping on, you're getting to a point where you can move forward, because you
Yes.
they honestly are asked to do more in their infrastructure than we are over here. So I don't know if that clarifies anything. But theirs is quite a bit older than anything that we have anywhere else.
Mr. Washington?
The question came up about compatibility. Is there any way to assure that compatibility will be greater for one company versus another?
I gotta be careful because I don't legally, I don't know what part I can go to here. The systems talk based on protocols, and I don't want to get into technology. So as long as that happens and there's a standard with that, what's more important, and this is just a judgment call, it's usually you run into less problems if the same vendor is dealing with all of the systems, because you don't get into those arguments of,
That was my point.
yeah, but that's more of a that's how I like to deal with it. I don't know how that fits into your parameters, but I would like to have the same ones, but that may not be what they need to do. So
Mr. Hess?
Okay, I'll make a motion then, we accept the lowest qualified bidder that will synchronize with the system that we have.
I think they all would.
And I think that Kevin and Trent and the sheriff should be able to make that decision. Have you even seen Kevin?
that
Mr. Duval?
they don't actually. I'm sorry. They don't need me on there to deal with that. Trent and Josh, and they deal with Ruder on a different basis. What potentially could happen if you needed to turn on some advanced stuff, then we would need to talk, but they can handle everything. They have different issues between the 911 building and all their various buildings. So I don't mean to interject. I only came up because I heard my name. They don't really need me as their part. We do handle our parts over here, and normally we deal with Wes for ours. So it's myself, it's Wes, and then one of the company that's on there. But I don't believe you need me for anything.
So
Mr. Hess, do I understand your motion to be such that Mr. Duval could be called upon if needed, but not necessarily have to participate unless needed?
Well, I think that as long as Trent is the IT man out there. I think they should work together and make a decision on which one is most compatible. If we could keep the same vendor, I would just soon keep the same vendor. That's why I made the motion that we do that.
If I could add something, just for my own clarification, can I sit down with these two vendors, along with Trent, and have us make a determination as to which one would be most beneficial to everybody? Then we can do that.
My motion.
If that is the understanding of the motion, we'll proceed with any discussion, and the seconder agrees with that. Then we'll proceed with any discussion you have on the motion. Mr. Seroy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also agree that staying with the common vendor for all our facilities is advantageous to us to limit our loss of service in case we have a service loss. And then I will also say that it is definitely an emergency at the Sheriff's Department, because we were involved in some nuclear safety drills.
The pre-drill.
The pre-drill this
Tuesday.
This Tuesday, and the phone that I had to use to call Will County couldn't dial Will County. But you could get calls, but you couldn't dial out calls. So there's definitely problems with all those phones in there. So the sooner that they can get that rectified, the better it is.
Mr. Kidner.
I would like to take a small issue with what was just said and state that sometimes it's good to share the risk so that in the event of an emergency, you have more than one supplier to handle the problem.
Mr. Duvall.
Well, that's generally an excellent way to look at it. Usually in technology, and I don't know who put out the bids to the sheriff. I have no reason to look at that. But usually in this type of technology, this vendor deals with this product, this vendor deals with that. So you actually, they're not backups for it, they're competitors. So somebody has expertise in this, somebody has expertise in it. A lot of times it's not transferable. I can't speak to it specifically in the bids. Again, I don't need to be involved in that part unless they ask me, and I can't imagine what you would need me for on that until you connect to us. But there's usually expertise in that specific product that they're quoting. I don't even know if they're quoting the same product.
We have a motion on the floor. Ms. Weber.
A couple things. One, I was concerned because the amount was given before the bidding went. That bothers me a lot.
Right. Me too.
I liked your idea of cooperative effort because that brings that first bidder back in there, that first quarter. So I appreciate that.
Okay.
Any other comments, questions? We're spending money, so we'll need a roll call vote on the motion.
Mr. Lear.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Hess.
Aye.
Ms. Weber.
Aye.
Mr. Payton.
Aye.
Ms. Parker.
Aye.
Mr. Kinzinger.
Aye.
Ms. Haas. Mr. Swanson.
Aye.
Ms. Zucolo.
Aye.
Mr. Dennell. Mr. Miller.
Aye.
Mr. Seroy.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Is there anything else you have?
I have one last thing that I just want to bring to the attention of this committee. We just got notified, actually, I was just made aware of it this morning. As most of you know, we go to the Illinois Department of Corrections probably 3 to 4 times a week and pick up those individuals who are here illegally, who have served their time in the Illinois Department of Corrections and have gone through all of the process from ICE. And so those individuals are brought back to our facility where they are then deported. We were just made aware this morning that the Illinois Department of Corrections, in typical Illinois fashion, will not be honoring those detainers for these illegal immigrants who have just served their sentence, and they will now be released from the Illinois Department of Corrections. So just a heads up. Yeah,
Yikes.
that's, and I'm sure that's coming from somewhere other than the head of the Illinois Department of Corrections. I'm sure that's coming from the governor. But I brought to the Criminal Justice Committee, I don't know, 5 or 6 months ago, basically a printout of those individuals that we were picking up and some of the charges that these people have been convicted of and served time for are some of the most heinous that you've seen. And so the public should know that these people will now be back on the street.
Oh,
So just a heads up. And will affect our population as well. So.
Anything more? Seeing nothing more, we'll have the sheriff step down.
Thank you.
We'll move to the auditors. Mr. Lee. You've distributed a monthly report. Is there any comments you want to make on the report?
Hey, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning. One is I noticed that I loaded the wrong cover page. It says January instead of December, so I do apologize for that. It will be corrected and uploaded to the auditor's website. I really don't have any commentary beyond what is in the report. So if there are any specific questions, I'd be happy to entertain them at this time.
Ms. Weber?
hi, thank you. I see by your comments that you're saying the auditor's office does not control the content of the monthly claims report. Is that, you agree with that?
Yeah, so the content is the claims report are basically transactions that have been posted to the general ledger that the descriptions that are typed into the accounting software, et cetera. So we don't control any of that. And so we just want to make that disclaimer known.
Okay. So what I've done at home is copied the 30 pages of this report. How did this get entered? Where did that get entered?
So the finance department's responsible for entering all the claims and so forth. So the only thing that we generate or that I generate are the graphical representations of the transactional data and the annotations that we include in the report.
In the front.
Yes.
Mr. Seawright?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to make note that the finance department should not be responsible for entering the claims. That duty was given to the auditor on December 1st, and 61 days later, we're still not entering the claims, which is violation of state law, because that's the accounting piece that we moved into the auditor's office. So I'll accept the claims, but I won't accept the report.
If there's anything more, Ms. Sukulu?
In your report, Mr. Lee,
Yes.
I'm sorry, in your report, it says that there is equipment that's kept in people's homes. Could you
Well, I don't
on
think it
that?
said it's kept in their home. I think it said it was shipped there.
okay, could you expand on that?
And so we saw some claims come across where things were purchased that were shipped to people's home address. And so we typically will question those and make sure that there is that the equipment actually belongs to the county, that it is brought to a county facility, etc. Most cases, it is. For example, there was a textbook, I think it was last month, that ended up at someone's home address, but they used their personal Amazon Prime account to get the discount. So those types of things happen. So we just question those. We think that if equipment does go to someone's home, there needs to be written authorization from a supervisor or something like that, that it's okay to ship it to the house, but it does belong to the county. And there also needs to be some procedures in place if that employee's it terminates from employment with the county, that equipment is surrendered if it's appropriate to do so.
Also, I have a question about the lobbyist.
Yes.
And getting detailed accounting of their activities.
Yes.
What do other offices do that have is this other places, other boards have lobbyists, and what's the procedure that they get used for that?
You know, they
As far as
may.
accounting? Do you
Th-
know?
Yeah, they may. I don't know specifically. I know from my perspective, I am always interested in understanding what we're paying for. The one-page thing that we get does not include anything as to what we're paying for. So, so I don't really agree with endorsing something that does not explain to me where the money's going and
But,
why.
Any other counties do you know of who have done this? Do they get detailed reports or no?
You know, I haven't asked,
Okay.
so I can ask.
Thank you.
Mr. Searay?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The intersection at CSL that's gonna be open, our lobbyists helped us get that open. So that, I'm just letting you know, that's what's having somebody on the inside helps you. Gets those permits signed when Mr. Rogers can't get those permits signed, our lobbyist makes a phone call and we've got the permits signed. Sorry, Mr. Rogers.
I think there's also, I think there've also been reports indicating that some upgrades on Armor Road are going to be included in the capital fund bill that will be a major safety concern in terms of Armor Road. I know I've been involved in one accident because of the traffic flow on Armor Road, and so if the lobbyists help get movement on that, I'll feel safer riding on that road. Any other questions or comments for the auditor on that? All right, we have monthly claims before us. Could we have a motion to approve the monthly claims? Mr. Dunn, is there a second to approve the monthly claims? Mr. Payton, are there any questions on the monthly claims? Hearing no questions on the monthly claims, we'll have a roll call vote, please.
Mr. Lear?
Aye.
Mr. Washington?
Aye.
Mr. Hess?
Aye.
Ms. Weber?
Aye.
Mr. Payton?
Aye.
Ms. Parker?
Aye.
Mr. Kinzinger? Ms. Haas? Mr. Swanson? Ms. DeColo?
Aye.
Mr. Dunn?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Mr. Searoy?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Is there anything more you have, Mr. Lee?
Not at this time. Thank you,
Okay,
Mr. Chairman.
thank you.
All right.
Is there any other business come before the committee? Is there any old business come before the committee? Is there any new business come before the committee? If there is none, Mr. Hess, a motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Mr.
Is there a second? Mr. Kulo. All in favor of the motion to adjourn, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries.